lot of people, a couple million, follow your work in the various social media platforms. But I'm going to ask you a few questions that have to do with the why of why you do what you do.
My introduction into the industry was actually through my interest of travel, not necessarily photography itself. I tried to do like a standard, 9 to 5 job for just a few months and just couldn't do it. Okay, what do I want to do? And my answer was I wanted to travel. And so at the time it was a very naive notion, but I was like, well, why don't I just become a photographer? Why not? How hard can it be? Like 3 or 4 days later, I bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok, and on the flight over, the woman sitting next to me was a rock climber from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. She was actually going to get married, and long story short, her friend was a photographer that had to back out at the last second. And so my first paying gig ever was shooting a traditional Buddhist wedding in the middle of a rural village in southern Thailand.
How does that travel and the photography combination affect the way that you view the world?
It forces you to look at the world differently. And that's kind of what drew me to travel in the first place, was that contrasting sense of life and how different people see things differently and people live their lives differently culturally. I found myself wanting to experience more of the world not through a viewfinder, and which is an interesting statement to make as a photographer.
Sure. Speak a little bit more about how that affects you personally. How does that affect your life with your family once you are at home?
It helps me take away those things we take for granted. I have a 2.5-year-old son. He's right at that amazing age where he is really just everything is new. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by Marcel Proust, and that's the true voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes.
What are some of the places that really stand out in your mind on your various travels?
I'd probably say one of my favorite countries in the world is definitely Nepal. They have amazing festivals and they're just so kind. My heart is definitely in the mountains. So being the Himalayas as the backdrop is kind of icing on the cake. Yeah, exactly.
Decent view.
It's not too bad. Iceland is definitely, as far as landscape specifically, is definitely a hotspot for me and for I think a lot of photographers out there, to be quite honest. Such varied terrain, beautiful pastel light, just a very, very active location. I love the challenge of the unpredictability of places like Iceland and Patagonia. And as you know, with the weather just kind of always keeping you on your toes. It's a very humbling reality to think about what I've been fortunate to do, and at the same time, how much more is out there and how much more we can learn from other people and see more cultures and more landscapes and mountains and sunrises. And it's just the world out there is awesome.
Well, speaking of the cultures and landscapes and humanitarian causes and that sort of thing, tell us a little bit about the Giving Lens.
We take teams of photographers of various skill sets to mostly developing countries to partner with an NGO that has chosen to fight for a specific cause, whether that's child education, like we do in Nicaragua and Peru, whether it's women's rights, like we do in Jordan, species preservation, like we're doing in Africa. And I'd be lying if I said that this probably wasn't the most meaningful and passionate piece of my photo career in general. It was always very superficial. You never really got the chance to get to know a country or to know its issues or to know its people. You're kind of just skimming through, maybe you have a week off work or whatnot. And that just never set well with me. Finding meaningful ways for photographers to give back, whether you do it in your own city or whatnot, is so powerful and makes such a difference. I mean, we have people that have been on some of our trips have become like board members of the NGOs that we partner with. Definitely try to do it organically. And by that, I mean, don't sit there and go to an organization and say, this is what I can do. My recommendation would be, how can I help?
Maybe it's one of these TGL trips and you just had that emotion or that sense of, I am really alive right now.
Listening to their story of the challenges they face as we're sitting inside their, small little hut, little shanty in the middle of Tanzania. And one of our participants asked, are the children affected? Do they have HIV? And for the wife to answer and say no, and to have such a great smile that even though they have HIV, they came together as a family, and that these kids don't have HIV. It was very moving. I don't think anyone left that room not crying. It was the solitude that drew me to nature and landscape. I love being in the middle of the night in front of Mount Fitzroy in Argentina, and just no one's around you. You're just having this really intimate experience with nature, and I think that's very cathartic for me. It's very important for who I am, but at the same time, a lot of what I was doing those initial years was chasing after moments like that. I love nature, I love solitude, but it's the human element that connects us. It's the human element that makes us whole. Right now, we are in the middle of a technological and social revolution when it comes to the photo industry. I look at a lot of travel photographers these days. As an aside, photographing people is not easy. A lot of people don't like it. It makes people feel uncomfortable. I totally understand and respect that. But for me to see so many travel photographers out there label themselves as travel photographers, and even if they have exceptional work, like we're talking like really good stuff, landing covers of Nat Geo, all this other type of stuff, and to go through their portfolio and see a complete lack of a human element, kind of, it bugs me in a way. I went to Tacloban just a few days after the earthquake. I was after the typhoon. I was actually over in Thailand at the time doing some work between there and Australia, and I was able to move things around, basically just headed there. And people that have nothing, that lost so much or everything, lost family members, to sit there and willing to help their neighbors that are still struggling and doing things like that, to me is motivational beyond anything else that I could ever experience.
You've been given much, but you have been able to give even more back. Thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, absolutely, Paul. Happy to be here, and I'm glad we're able to do this.